Welcome to our webinar, the NDIS, Is It For Me? Is the NDIS for me? And the experiences of people living with multiple sclerosis. To understand whether it's for you, you need to know what the NDIS is and whether you would be eligible for supports and services. You also need to know what services and supports you're currently accessing now. This will help you make an informed decision. We'll also be talking about the experiences of people with multiple sclerosis who have accessed the scheme and what they've been saying about the outcomes they've achieved. Hopefully this information will help you consider if the NDIS is relevant for you, and it will help you make an informed decision. What is the NDIS? The National Disability Insurance Scheme is a new way of purchasing and delivering supports and services for people with disability or a significant impairment. The NDIS is transforming the disability sector, and it's impacting the lives of people affected by MS in a positive way. It's about giving the same opportunity and right of access to services to all Australians, and it's about increasing social and economic participation and providing people with choice and control. It funnels money into personalised supports and interventions to assist everyday life and reduce the costs of care over the span of a person's lifetime, giving you more choice and control. It's also about connecting informal supports, mainstream and community sectors. Let's talk a little bit about eligibility. The NDIS supports people with significant and permanent disability that adversely affects how they take part in everyday life. This can include a disability that's episodic, meaning that some days are more affected by it than others. The following may help you understand if you're eligible for supports and services through the scheme. And here are some questions that you might be able to answer that help you to work out whether you may be eligible. Do you usually need support from a person or equipment to do everyday things for yourself because of an impairment or condition that's likely to be permanent? Do you have an impairment or condition that's likely to be permanent or lifelong that stops you from doing everyday things for yourself? Will you be under 65 years of age when the scheme rolls out in your area? And do you meet the residency requirements? Are you an Australian citizen or hold a permanent visa or hold a protected special category visa? If you answered yes to these questions, you may be eligible. Reasonable and necessary supports. You'll come across the term reasonable and necessary. The National Disability Insurance Agency funds supports that are deemed to be reasonable and necessary. They must be related to a person's disability, not include day-to-day costs that are not related to a person's disability or support needs. They have to represent value for money and take into account what is reasonable to expect of carers, other informal supports, and the services you're receiving through the community or mainstream, such as health, education, or housing. For nearly 3 years, the NDIS has been in trial in regions across the country. We've initiated phone calls to nearly 1,000 people affected by multiple sclerosis to find out if they understand the relevance and the opportunity presented by the introduction of the NDIS. Conversations have fallen into 4 categories depending on the level of information the person has about the scheme. People with little or no knowledge of the scheme. The initial conversation revolves around the basic workings of the scheme, how it's helping other people with MS, and how it may assist them, and how to go about completing the access and eligibility process. People who are aware of the scheme but don't think it relates to them, as they either don't think they have a disability or they think that there are people out there who need it more than them. The conversation for these people revolves around discussions about how MS is affecting their daily life and how the scheme can assist to maintain and build quality of life. There's a third category of people who have attempted to access the scheme but have met a roadblock. conversations usually revolve around the process. Frequently, these people are assisted to complete the paperwork with regular follow-up to determine their progress through the process. And finally, there are people who are well informed about the scheme and have either made a decision that they're not in need of services, in which case the conversation is generally fairly brief, or they've become a participant. Discussions with these people determines the types of services and supports that are in place, the outcomes they desire, and the level of satisfaction they've had with the scheme. "95% of the people we talk to report a high level of satisfaction with planning. They felt respected and understood by planners." But here are some quotes from people that we've talked to about how they felt about the planning process. You can see for these people that, they may have felt some trepidation about the process. I think the important message from this is the better prepared you are and the more knowledge you have about the scheme, the more likely you are to get a better outcome when you have your meeting with the planner if you're eligible for supports and services. Every participant plan is unique. Plans are directed by you, the participant, and are based on your individual goals and aspirations. And for more than 400 people affected by MS, these 400 people are now receiving an NDIS plan, and they report positive personal outcomes for themselves, for their families, and for their everyday life. They report that it's changed the way they live their lives. For some, it's giving them more independence. It's providing them with choice and control over who delivers the services. It's providing them with greater access to the community and employment, and it's relieving the burden of care that family and friends may carry. Let's talk about some of the outcomes. Some people are receiving funded supports for the first time ever, and this is enabling them to re-establish social and community participation, remain in or return to the workforce, move out of residential care, return to studies, re-establish roles in their families, or to remain at home. The NDIS funded supports are enabling people affected by MS in a range of ways. And I'd really like to give you some examples because I think that'll help you figure out whether or not you think it might be for you. One participant we spoke to now has a cleaner who comes once a fortnight, as well as someone who helps her with meal preparation. The outcomes for her are fantastic. She's now able to remain in the workforce and participate more fully in her children's lives. In the past, completing these tasks impacted on her fatigue levels so badly that she was considering giving up work and was too tired at the end of the day to play with her children and help them with their homework. For another participant, there was a profound change in her life. The supports and services she's now receiving and the home modifications undertaken have allowed her to leave the nursing home she was in and return to her own home, which was her major goal. Another person we spoke to was living alone and working full-time. She was finding that managing work and maintaining her home was becoming more and more difficult due to her fatigue levels and mobility issues. But she felt she was unable to reduce her work hours as she needed to pay her mortgage. She's now receiving domestic and garden assistance, as well as some home modifications including ramps and rails. She's continuing in employment, she's maintaining her independence, and she's much more secure now that she knows she can continue to work. You can see from these few examples that the NDIS is transforming the lives of people with disability. You can see here some quotes from people. The NDIS supports have made a big difference to my life and my family. My plan makes allowances for changes in my MS. But we know that for some people, getting a plan is just the beginning of the journey, and we know that some have had difficulty implementing their plans. For some people with MS, their cognition, mood and fatigue levels have been real barriers to activating their plans. The NDIA has now recognised this and is including funding in many plans for something called coordination of supports. And that provides funding for someone to help people to activate their plans. We also know that supports and services people are receiving are generous. The planners from the NDIA are evaluated on the outcomes that their participants achieve. This means that they put in place the supports and services that are reasonable and necessary for a person to achieve their goals. More than 400 people affected by multiple sclerosis have met eligibility for the NDIS and now have approved plans with individualised supports and services that meet their needs and goals. These supports vary according to what is reasonable and necessary to help them achieve their goals and aspirations. The range of supports, the number of hours, and the amount of funding associated with each support item is listed in their NDIS plan. Also listed in their plans are the informal and community and mainstream supports that they already receive and how these contribute to achieving their personal goals. So, some more experiences so far. Some of the most common support items include domestic support, yard and house maintenance, personal care, hygiene, food prep, help with everyday tasks, continence aids, specialist assessment, including occupational therapy, physio or speech, and continence assessments. There's also access to community participation, shopping, social outings, group and community activities and events, home modifications, equipment and repairs, transport funding, and as we talked about previously, coordination support to help people get their plans activated. The next steps and how we can assist. Have a look at the information on your local MS organisation's website at www.ms.org.au and click on the large NDIS button. A good place to start is to view the NDIS MS My Stories. That's a video of 3 people who are now participants and the way the scheme has changed their lives. It's also a good idea to take some time to look at the NDIS checklist. You can also find that on that same page. Your other option is to contact your local MS organisation if you'd like to chat about the NDIS and if you'd like some support to access the scheme. Now you have a better idea of how the scheme works and how it's helping other people living with MS, you might like to take those next steps. Finally, it's good to remember that the eligibility for the scheme is based on the impact of MS on your day-to-day life, on communication, social interaction, learning, mobility, self-care, self-management, and the barriers that are preventing you from fully participating in your own community on a social and economic level. I'd like to thank you for listening to the webinar, and I'll say goodbye now. Thank you.